It is the biggest single art collection that's ever going up for auction.
I'm trying to teach people a form of art that anybody can do. It's not traditional art, it's not fine art. There's a lot going on besides painting, and I think people are aware of that and they enjoy that.
Bob Ross, a name synonymous with tranquil landscapes and the soothing swish of a paintbrush, had a journey that was nothing short of inspiring. From his early days in the Air Force to his revolutionary wet-on-wet painting technique that captivated viewers, Bob's artistic path was remarkable. However, his story doesn't end with his peaceful scenery. After his passing in 1995, a tangled battle ensued over his legacy, spearheaded by the Kowalskis, who sought control over his artistic empire. Stay tuned as we delve into the life of Bob Ross, uncovering the secrets behind the man who painted our dreams. Early life and military service. Robert Norman Ross, famously known as Bob Ross, was born on October 29, 1942, in Daytona Beach, Florida. His father, Jack, worked as a carpenter, and his mother, Ollie, was a waitress. Growing up in a modest home in Orlando, Florida, Bob's early life was marked by a profound connection with nature and animals. Even as a young boy, he nurtured a variety of wounded animals, including squirrels, armadillos, snakes, and alligators, creatures that would intimidate many. This love for animals was so deep that one of his rescued squirrels later became a regular guest on his television shows. Bob shared his childhood with a half-brother, Jim, whom he occasionally mentioned on his show. At the age of 13, Bob's formal education came to an abrupt end when he dropped out of high school in the 9th grade to join his father in carpentry. It was during this time that Bob suffered an accident that would see him lose part of his left index finger. Despite this setback, the injury didn't impair his later ability to hold a palette or hinder his painting skills, which he would famously demonstrate on his tranquil and inspiring painting sessions on television. In 1961, an 18-year-old Bob Ross enlisted in the United States Air Force as a medical records technician. Standing 6 feet 2 inches tall, his height and flat feet restricted him to desk jobs rather than piloting aircraft or working in their confined spaces. Bob quickly rose through the ranks and became a master sergeant, eventually becoming the first sergeant of the clinic at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. It was in Alaska that Bob first encountered the stunning landscapes of snow and mountains, motifs that would later define his tranquil paintings. During his service, he developed a fast painting technique, capitalizing on brief breaks from his duties. Bob was tasked with some of the more demanding roles, including enforcing discipline among the recruits. Known as Bust-em-up Bobby for his stern demeanor, he was the one who made recruits scrub the latrines, make their beds, and the one who shouted at them for tardiness. However, this role of the strict disciplinarian conflicted with his inner nature. Disliking the harshness his military role required, Bob made a pivotal vow to himself that he would never raise his voice again once he left the military. True to his word, after his discharge, Bob transformed into the gentle, soft-spoken icon the world grew to love. The artistic journey of Bob Ross. Bob Ross's journey into the world of painting began during his 20-year stint in the Air Force. While stationed in Alaska, Ross's passion for painting ignited after attending an art class at the Anchorage USO Club. Unlike his instructors who favored abstract painting, Ross yearned for practical skills. He famously critiqued, "They'd tell you what makes a tree, but they wouldn't tell you how to paint a tree." His true breakthrough came when he stumbled upon The Magic of Oil Painting, a television show hosted by German painter Bill Alexander. Alexander's technique, alla prima, known as wet on wet, revolutionized Ross's approach to art. This method allowed for a painting to be completed in just 30 minutes, a technique Ross soon mastered and utilized in his own works, painting captivating Alaskan landscapes on novelty gold mining pans. As Ross's skills improved, so did his sales, eventually earning more from his artwork than his military salary. This financial success led him to retire from the Air Force in 1981, returning to his native Florida. He deepened his mastery under Alexander, eventually joining his company as a traveling salesman and tutor. The real turning point came after meeting Annette Kowalski at one of his workshops in Clearwater, Florida. She saw potential in Ross that even he hadn't fully realized. Together with Ross's wife, Kowalski, and her husband, Walt, they invested their savings to start Ross's own business. Despite initial struggles, this venture set the stage for his future success. In 1982, his teaching was captured on a pilot episode by a station in Falls Church, Virginia. The positive response was overwhelming, with 60 PBS stations picking up his show within the first year. By 1983, Ross was invited to Muncie, Indiana, by PBS station WIPB, which promised him creative freedom, a critical factor in his decision to move. Ross developed a strong connection with the staff there, traveling back every 3 months to tape his show, despite moving back to Florida in 1989. His iconic show, The Joy of Painting, aired from January 11, 1983, until May 17, 1994. Ross famously said he did the show for free, earning instead from his how-to books, videotapes, and art supplies. His business acumen complemented his artistic talent, making art accessible to all. Even after the original run ended, his shows continued to inspire new generations of artists. They still air across various platforms, including the non-commercial digital sub-channel network, Create, and the streaming service Hulu. During the COVID-19 pandemic, his calming presence and art lessons found a new audience in the United Kingdom, with the BBC re-airing episodes to comfort viewers during lockdown. During each half-hour segment of The Joy of Painting, Bob Ross instructed viewers in the quick, wet-on-wet oil painting technique. This involved painting a scene directly from his imagination, in real time, without sketching it first. Ross deconstructed the process into simple steps, explaining his limited paint palette along the way. Mira Shore, an artist and art critic, once compared Ross to Fred Rogers, the beloved host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. She noted similarities in their soft-spoken demeanor and the slow, deliberate pace of their speech, both of which resonated deeply with their audiences. Ross's unique approach to teaching art was only one part of his legacy. With the support of his business partners, the Kowalskis, Ross leveraged his television popularity to launch a lucrative line of art supplies and class recordings. This enterprise grew into a $15 million business known as Bob Ross Incorporated. The company expanded to offer classes taught by artists trained in Ross's painting methods. After Ross's passing, ownership of the company was transferred to the Kowalskis, continuing his educational mission. Beyond the canvas, Ross had a profound love for wildlife, especially squirrels, which he often filmed in his garden. He regularly cared for injured or abandoned animals, and these little creatures frequently made cameo appearances on his canvases, adding a personal touch to his artworks that endeared him further to his audience. Over his lifetime, Ross painted an estimated 30,000 paintings. Despite such prolific output, original Bob Ross paintings are surprisingly rare in the art market. Their scarcity is largely due to the high demand and Ross's disinterest in commercializing his works as investment pieces. His paintings usually sell for thousands of dollars, sometimes exceeding $10,000, but they have never been sold by major auction houses. Bob Ross Incorporated retains many of the paintings from The Joy of Painting. One notable piece, A Walk in the Woods, Ross's first painting on television, was sold during a pledge drive following the first season of his show. It remains with Ryan Nelson, a Minnesota-based art dealer. Nelson, who acquired it from the original buyer. He has become the primary dealer for the few Ross paintings that have surfaced on the open market. Nelson has set an asking price of $9,850,000 for A Walk in the Woods, and has hinted at other plans for the painting if it does not sell. Interestingly, Ross's artwork is considered a hybrid of fine art and entertainment memorabilia by art appraisers. It is more frequently sought after by ordinary fans of the joy of painting than by traditional wealthy art collectors. Most of the artwork that circulates among collectors comes from Ross's pre-television period. Bob Ross's journey in art also led to memorable appearances that captured the hearts of diverse audiences. In 1987, Ross showcased his love for country music when he was invited on stage by Hank Snow at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee. The audience greeted him with a roaring ovation. Initially nervous, Ross eased his jitters by cracking a joke, charming the crowd even further. Later, Snow was treated to a private painting lesson by Ross, bridging the worlds of country music and serene artistry. Ross's charm extended beyond music into television. He visited New York City multiple times to promote his hardcover book, The Best of the Joy of Painting with Bob Ross. His television appearances included a memorable stint on The Joan Rivers Show in 1989 and another notable live appearance in 1992 with hosts Regis Philbin and Kathy Lee Gifford. In 1994, he took center stage on The Phil Donahue Show, where he invited 5 audience members to paint alongside him, with Donahue himself also participating in the painting session. In the early 90s, Ross also featured in several MTV promotional spots, aligning perfectly with Generation X's growing fondness for irony and retro culture, making him an icon of the era. Exploring Bob Ross's technique and style, Bob Ross's wet-on-wet technique, also known as a la prima, allows a painting to progress without the initial layer of paint drying, enabling Ross to complete each piece quickly. What made this technique particularly accessible was its minimal requirement for tools and colors, thus not necessitating a large investment in expensive equipment. Bob often used odorless mineral spirits, which he recommended for cleaning brushes, maintaining a simple and environmentally friendly approach. Ross's approach was not just about painting quickly, but also efficiently. He predominantly used large 1- and 2-inch brushes along with painting knives, tools that facilitated the swift creation of landscapes, which became his signature scenes. Each episode of The Joy of Painting showcased Ross crafting these tranquil images. But what viewers may not know is that he painted 3 versions of nearly every piece featured on the show. The first version was prepared before filming and served as a reference off-camera. The second was the version viewers watched him paint live. Finally, a third, more detailed version was created post-filming for his instructional books. Each was distinctly marked Kowalski for the initial, TV for the televised, and book for the detailed version used in his guides. Ross's mastery and promotion of this technique began after being inspired by German painter Bill Alexander, who introduced Ross to the wet-on-wet style. In a tribute to his mentor, Ross dedicated the first episode of the second season of his show to Alexander. However, as Ross's popularity soared, his relationship with Alexander strained. Alexander felt overshadowed by Ross's success, famously stating in a 1991 interview with the New York Times that Ross betrayed him. He said he invented the wet-on-wet technique and trained Ross, yet Ross thought he could do it better. This couldn't be further from the truth, as the wet-on-wet technique dates back to the 15th century, originating in Flanders. Esteemed artists like Frans Hals, Diego Velázquez, Caravaggio, and Paul Cézanne utilized this method, which later influenced modern masters like John Everett Millais, John Singer Sargent, and Claude Monet. This technique allows for greater spontaneity and is particularly suited for capturing the ephemeral qualities of light and atmosphere, characteristics that define many of Ross's works. Bob Ross transformed the art world not just with his techniques, but with his uniquely soothing style that captivated millions of viewers. He's famously remembered for his gentle phrases like, "Let's add some happy little trees," which not only guided the paintbrush, but also comforted the soul. Ross's approach went beyond just teaching art. It was about creating an oasis of calm. In every episode of The Joy of Painting, Ross engaged in a ritual that became a fan favorite. He thoroughly enjoyed cleaning his paintbrush, a process he turned into an entertaining spectacle. Dipping his brush in odorless thinner, he would energetically strike it against a can and then a trash can, exclaiming, "Beat the devil out of it!" with a hearty chuckle. This method not only cleaned the brush, but also injected a dose of humor and lightness into each session. Ross's attire was as consistent as his painting style: jeans paired with a plain, light-colored shirt. He believed this simple, timeless look would keep the focus on the art, not the artist. Speaking directly to the viewer, he created an intimate experience, as if he were teaching a one-on-one class, making each viewer feel like a personal guest in his studio. Bob Ross's philosophy on painting was deeply influenced by the positive outlook he chose to embrace. He once explained that a viewer wrote to him saying everything in his world seemed happy. Bob responded by saying that he paints to create the kind of world he wants, making it as happy as he wants it to be. The scenes Ross painted, mountains, lakes, snow, and log cabins, were inspired by his years in Alaska during his Air Force career. He often emphasized that everyone has inherent artistic talent and encouraged viewers with his reassuring reminder, "We don't make mistakes. We just have happy accidents." In 2014, the blog 538 analyzed 381 episodes of Bob Ross painting live. They found that 91% of his paintings included at least one tree, 44% featured clouds, 39% had mountains, and 34% included mountain lakes. His work seldom showed human figures or signs of human life. Occasionally, he would add a cabin, often with a chimney but without smoke, suggesting it might be unoccupied. Personal life. Bob Ross led a life as layered and intriguing as his art. He was married 3 times and fathered 2 children. His first child came from an early relationship when he was still a teenager, and his second, Robert Stephen "Steve" Ross, was with his first wife, Vivian Ridge. Steve inherited his father's artistic talent and even appeared on The Joy of Painting, where he read viewer questions that Bob would answer through painting demonstrations. Bob's marriage to Vivian ended in divorce in 1977, allegedly due to his infidelity. He found love again with his second wife, Jane, but their time together was marred by tragedy when she died of cancer in 1992. 2 years later, in 1995, Bob married Linda Brown, just 2 months before his own death. This third marriage, like much of his personal life, remained largely out of the public eye by Bob's choice. Despite his fame, Bob fiercely guarded his privacy, a trait documented in the 2011 PBS documentary Bob Ross, the Happy Painter. His interviews were rare and precious, with many being destroyed as part of a legal settlement between his family and Bob Ross Inc., a company still protective of his legacy and privacy. Bob's son, Steve, despite showing promise as a painter, chose not to follow in his father's footsteps, which caused some tension between them. This strain lasted until Bob was diagnosed with lymphoma, shortly after losing his second wife. The diagnosis brought father and son back together, reconciling before Bob's condition worsened. In his final years, even as his health declined, Bob continued to film episodes of The Joy of Painting, sometimes recording 3 or 4 episodes in a single day. He kept his illness a secret from almost everyone, focusing instead on bringing joy and creativity to his viewers. Final days, death, and the ensuing legal battle. Bob Ross faced profound challenges towards the end of his life that few were aware of. As Bob's health deteriorated, the relationship with his business partners, the Kowalskis, began to strain, particularly over the control of his artistic legacy and the rights to his image. In the mid-1990s, as Bob battled illness, he felt the sting of abandonment, sensing that those he once considered friends were now more concerned with the financial benefits his name brought than with his well-being. Bob's health issues culminated in 1995, a year that saw him take bold steps to fulfill his remaining ambitions despite growing pressure from the Kowalskis. Among these was an appearance on Elmer and Friends, a popular talk program where Bob, already experiencing significant hair loss, wore a wig to maintain his image. The Kowalskis, now significant figures within the company, were worried that any public awareness of Bob's health struggles might impact their business and exerted pressure on Bob to align his public appearances with their business strategies. However, Bob remained steadfast in his desire to create a positive environment for his audience, particularly the children who admired him. The tension escalated when Annette Kowalski visited Bob during his final days, allegedly with a contract that would allow them to use his likeness posthumously. Bob's son, Steve, protective of his father, refused to bring the contract to Bob, angered by the sudden shift in the Kowalskis' attitude towards his father once his illness became widely known. Despite not signing the contract during her visit, the Kowalski family's intent to control Bob's artistic assets persisted, adding stress to Bob's final days. Bob spent his last moments in a battle for his legacy, often overheard shouting, "You're not getting my name," a clear indication of his resistance to the Kowalskis' attempts to commercialize his persona. Despite his efforts, Bob could not foresee the extent of the control over his image that would continue after his passing. Bob Ross passed away on the 4th of July, 1995 at the age of 52. His death, due to complications from lymphoma and a history of smoking, was as quiet as the man himself, confined to the circle of his immediate family and friends. His burial took place in Woodlawn Memorial Park in Gotha, Florida. In keeping with his private nature, his funeral was attended by just around 40 people, and notably, the Kowalski family was absent. The aftermath of Bob's death revealed the challenges of his legacy, particularly involving the Kowalskis, who had been his business partners. Once Bob was no longer there to protect his interests, the Kowalskis saw an opportunity to assert control over Bob Ross, Inc. They were determined to secure the rights to his name and likeness, crucial for continuing to profit from merchandise and other business opportunities linked to Bob's fame. However, Bob had prepared for such a scenario. His will explicitly left his estate, including the rights to his name and image, to his son, Steve, and his half-brother, Jimmy Cox. Despite these clear wishes, the Kowalskis challenged the will. They claimed rights to every asset Bob had acquired while he was part of Bob Ross, Inc.
Little did he know that this single image would go on to become one of the most iconic photographs of the American Wild West, a portrait of a man who would become a legend in his own time. Born in Iowa in 1846, Cody had already lived a life of adventure by the time he sat for that fateful photograph. He had worked as a herder and a trapper, a gold prospector, and a Pony Express rider. He had fought in the Civil War and scouted for the U.S. Army, earning a reputation as a skilled marksman and a fearless adventurer. But it was in the years after that photograph was taken that Cody truly came into his own. He began to perform in Wild West shows, showcasing his skills as a rider, a shooter, and a storyteller. He took the name Buffalo Bill, a nod to his legendary prowess as a buffalo hunter, and began to build a mythology around himself that would captivate audiences around the world. Annie Oakley, the sharpshooter who defied expectations. A photograph of Annie Oakley, taken in the late 19th century, captures the essence of this remarkable woman who defied expectations and became one of the most famous sharpshooters in American history. Born Phoebe Ann Moses in Ohio in 1860, Annie's life took a surprising turn when she entered a shooting contest against Frank E. Butler, a renowned marksman. To everyone's astonishment, Annie won the match, and the two later fell in love and married. Marksmanship caught the attention of Buffalo Bill Cody, who invited her to join his Wild West show. She quickly became a star attraction, mesmerizing audiences with her incredible feats of skill. A petite woman standing just 5 feet tall, Annie shattered stereotypes and proved that gender was no barrier to success in a male-dominated world. Throughout her career, Annie met many notable figures, including the legendary Sioux Chief Sitting Bull, who was so impressed by her abilities that he nicknamed her Little Sure Shot. She continued to set records and perform well into her 60s, cementing her status as an American icon. Jesse James, the Confederate outlaw. A grainy photograph from the post-Civil War era shows a man with a steely gaze and a thick beard, the face of one of the most notorious outlaws in American history, Jesse James. Born in Missouri in 1847, James and his brother Frank grew up in a family with strong Confederate sympathies. When the Civil War broke out, the James brothers joined a group of pro-Confederate guerrillas known for their ruthless tactics and alleged atrocities against Union soldiers. After the war, Jesse and Frank found themselves adrift in a changed world. Embittered by the Confederate defeat and facing an uncertain future, they turned to a life of crime, forming the infamous James Younger Gang. For over a decade, the gang terrorized the Midwest, robbing banks, trains, and stagecoaches with impunity. Despite their reputation for violence, the James brothers were seen by some as folk heroes, striking a blow against the banks and railroads that many poor farmers and laborers resented. However, their luck finally ran out in 1882 when Jesse was shot and killed by Robert Ford, a new recruit to the gang who hoped to collect the substantial reward on James's head. Wyatt Earp, the lawman of the American frontier. In a photograph from the late 19th century, a tall, lean man with a thick mustache and a steely gaze stares out at the viewer. This is Wyatt Earp, one of the most famous lawmen of the American West. Born in Illinois in 1848, Earp's early life was marked by a series of adventures and misadventures, from working as a teamster and buffalo hunter to running a brothel and saloon. However, it was as a lawman that Earp truly made his mark. In the 1870s and 1880s, he served as a deputy marshal in the rough-and-tumble cow towns of Kansas and Arizona, earning a reputation as a tough and uncompromising enforcer of the law. His most famous moment came in 1881 when he and his brothers, along with his friend Doc Holliday, faced off against a gang of outlaws known as the Cowboys in the legendary gunfight at the OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona. The gunfight, which lasted only 30 seconds, left 3 cowboys dead and cemented Earp's place in Western lore. However, it also marked the beginning of a series of personal and professional setbacks for Earp, as he faced accusations of murder and was forced to leave Tombstone. Calamity Jane, the legendary frontierswoman. Born Martha Jane Canary in Missouri in 1852, Calamity Jane would go on to become one of the most legendary women of the Wild West. A true frontierswoman, she was known for her sharpshooting skills, her penchant for adventure, and her unconventional lifestyle. This rare photograph offers a captivating glimpse into the life of this iconic woman, showcasing her memorable attire and unforgettable presence in American history. From a young age, Jane was drawn to the excitement and danger of the frontier. She learned to ride horses and shoot guns at an early age, skills that would serve her well throughout her life. In 1868, at the age of 16, she headed west with her family, settling in Wyoming Territory. It was there that Jane first gained notoriety for her marksmanship and her fearless spirit. She worked as a scout for the U.S. Army, guiding troops through the rugged terrain